Anto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1597 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Season 7 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast from Monaris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, making his Toronto Mic debut. It's always exciting when someone makes their Toronto Mic debut. It's Doug Broad. Welcome, Doug.
Glad to be here, Mike.
Glad to have you here. I mentioned to you when you arrived that this is the first time in the illustrious history of this podcast, and that's almost, 12 and a half years or something. This is the first time I recorded 3, not 1 and not 2, 3 episodes of Toronto Mic'd in the same day. That's a first.
That's a lot of talking.
So listen, I warned you. I said, you're going to have to carry the load here. I'm out of gas. You're going to have to do this one yourself. So go.
I'm happy to.
But I'm happy to meet you. When I announced that Doug Broad was making his Toronto Mic debut, a number of people put up their hand to say hello to you. The first one being Gilles LeBlanc.
Gilles LeBlanc. Yes, I work with him at the Toronto Star.
Do you see that article hanging on the wall? I'm making you turn all the way around.
I do see it. I saw it when I walked in.
Do you know who wrote that article?
Gilles LeBlanc. And guess who commissioned that article? Me.
Is that true?
It is true.
Okay, I need some info. First of all, you know what I'm going to do? On that note, I'm going to crack open a Great Lakes beer because I'm, overwhelmed by that fun fact. Hold on here.
Yeah, Gilles actually suggested it, and I said, yeah, let's do it.
All right, we're going to get you right in front of that mic, my friend. Yeah, good. So Gilles had the idea because he's a big listener, and he's like, there's this guy in his South Etobicoke basement who just recorded episode 1000, and he's talking to great people, not just Ed Keenan, not just Ben Rayner, not just David Ryder, but he's got all these interesting people on. And he came to you and said, hey, we should do this. And you said, did you have to think about it? Give me a little inside.
Not really, no. I trust his judgment, and I thought it was an interesting story to pursue. And to be honest with you, that was a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I'm a recent arrival to Toronto, 5 years, from New York. So when I got the job at the Star, one of the things I wanted to do was to sort of familiarize myself with a lot of the culture that's going on here. And when he pitched the story, I'm like, yeah, this is an interesting story. Let's do it.
Thank you so much. No, I might have to put you in the FOTM Hall of Fame after I'm learning this. So Gilles comes up with the idea, pitches it to you. You say, go ahead. So you came from New York 5 years ago, and I'm assuming that was for a job at the Toronto Star.
No, you would be assuming incorrectly.
I'm going to fire my crack research staff. So can we do this? So you have a new book that I read. It is about the founder of the Church of Satan. And I'm vamping because I'm scrolling down my notes. I'm going to get this name. I'm going to get the proper name of this book. I know you know the name, but I want to know the name. Yes. It is called Born with a Tale. And it's about Anton LaVey. And he's the founder of the Church of Satan. And you wrote a biography about him. And we're going to get into that. So everybody listening who's a member of the Church of Satan, all you Anton LaVey heads out there who want to talk about this fascinating person, we're going to get to that. But off the top, I need to know more about you, where you've been, where you've written. So I'm going to burn through a couple more notes that came in, and then we're going to do your biography. Is that okay?
Sure.
And by the way, thank you for not correcting me. It's Born of a Tale, but there's more to that title, okay? You got more words in that title. The Devilish Life and Wicked Times of Anton Szandor LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan.
It's a mouthful.
You know, what? You got to get the keywords in there now, right? It's not
You
just
do.
you got to get those keywords for search engine optimization. It's important.
Absolutely.
Okay, where do we begin, my friend?
You tell me.
Okay, so I've got my notes here. Oh yeah, I'm going to burn through these FOTM notes. My apologies. Okay, so Bob Wagner wrote in and said, "Tell Doug I say hi. He's a great writer." Bob Wagner. Have you ever met Bob?
Yes, of course. Funny story. So I met Bob at backstage at a Darkness concert at the Phoenix Concert Hall. Excuse me. So a couple of years ago, I went to the show and I had my first book with me. My first book is called They Just Seem a Little Weird, How Kiss, Cheap Trick, Aerosmith, and Stars Remade Rock and Roll.
Right.
And I knew the Darkness were in town, and I knew the Darkness. I knew Justin. I had written about him. I'd written about the band many, many times. And I met him many years ago, and I told him I was coming, and I'd want to give him the book. He said, sure, come on. And then after the gig, went into a room backstage, and Bob was there because Bob knew Justin as well. And I met Bob, and we talked about our fanaticisms, and he told me about his major book he was writing.
Max Webster.
Max Webster.
And it's a very good book.
It's beautiful. He showed me a copy of it. It's tremendous.
Listen, he just moved to Montreal, so he was a Toronto guy. In fact, I met him in Blair Packham's living room. So I got Blair Packham from the Jitters invited me to a party all the way in East York. Okay, I know you're coming from afar here, but I went all the way to East York to go to a party at Blair Packham's house. I met a bunch of interesting people there, including Bob Wagner, and then through a different channel, he ended up at one of my events, and he's a great FOTM now, fast friends. But I've got to get him on the program so we can talk about Max Webster.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like a guitar guy.
He's a guitar guy. Yeah, and he said that he had met Justin on a cruise, on a rock cruise, and he was playing with a Queen cover band, I believe, and they bonded.
Oh, that would make sense because what was the Queen? Was it Bohemian? What is there's rock? There's some musical that came to town and Queen was behind it, and Bob played guitar. Anyways, he had to audition in front of like Brian May and these guys or whatever. Legendary story. Now this is the Bob Wagner podcast, but there's another note here, and then we're gonna find out more about Doug. So Rob Pruce, do you know this name?
I do, only because we became Facebook friends, and I think he had written on Instagram or Twitter recently that he was looking forward to my book.
And he can't wait for you to become an FOTM. But I see now his question's really related to the book, so I might hold on to the question. And when we get to Born with a Tale, The Devilish Life and Wicked Times of Anton Szandor LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan. See, just saying that title, I'm exhausted, right? So, oh my goodness. When we get to that, I'm going to get back to Rob Pruce's question here. But yourself, so, okay, I've seen, you've been around since the 80s, but what made you want to, write about entertainment, write about music? Like, what made you want to become a writer?
Well, I mean, I've been a journalist all my life. I was, just to give sort of my quick resume, I was an editor at Entertainment Weekly magazine for 11 years, and I was at Spin magazine. I was editor-in-chief of Spin for 6 years. Then I went to TV Guide magazine in New York, and I was editor-in-chief there for like 2.5 years. And so my entire career has been pretty much pop culture entertainment.
Yeah.
And now I'm at The Star, where I am editing a lot of the entertainment section, a lot of movies, books, some music content, some television content. So, that's been my life's blood. And, I did my first book around 4 or 5 years ago. I started it, and after that came out, I was thinking of another book to write, and Anton LaVey always kind of fascinated me. I'm into sort of the macabre and comic books and horror movies, and he was a guy who I thought needed a real thorough biography written about him.
And you did just that. And before we get into that, I got questions about Entertainment Weekly, okay?
Sure.
So when you're at Entertainment Weekly, we're in the 1990s here, I guess. You kind of you joined shortly after the launch of Entertainment Weekly. And Entertainment Weekly is a big deal. Like, this is a big hit.
Yes.
Oh, I paused
huge.
for the dramatic effect here.
No,
this is a big hit.
It was a huge magazine at the time. And one of the great things about working there, and I'm not giving away any secrets, but
No, I want the secrets.
It was during the during a very robust era in magazine making and magazine editing, and working in an entertainment magazine, we were able to write off and get reimbursed for every CD, every concert ticket, every movie ticket, everything.
Wow.
So that was pretty awesome.
That is awesome. And I'm wondering, is there any stories you could share with us, perhaps, where you had a clash with a publicist or a celebrity when you're writing at Entertainment Weekly?
I was pretty good. I never really clashed with people. I try to be on the straight and narrow. But no, I mean, I had a lot of interesting times there. I look back now at some of the interviews I did. Like I interviewed Quentin Tarantino right when Reservoir Dogs came out.
That's pre-Pulp Fiction. That's huge.
Pre-Pulp Fiction. Yeah, it was on the phone. I'll give you a funny story.
Because you're talking about maybe my favorite director of all time in Pulp Fiction.
Same.
Around the corner, I got a poster of Pulp Fiction hanging up in the other room there. That might be my favorite movie of all time.
Well, just to go back a little bit, so before Entertainment Weekly, I was at a magazine called Video Review. We were the world authority on home video. This is like during the Betamax VHS days.
Yes.
And we reviewed video cameras and recorders and Laserdisc players and things like that. But we also reviewed videotapes. So there was a lot of software stuff, and we did a lot of movie stuff. And I did a number of interviews there that were pretty funny. One was with Paul Rubens, who insisted on being interviewed in character as Pee Wee Herman, which was kind of annoying on the phone, as you can imagine. And then,
I know you are, but what am I?
Exactly. And then one of my favorite interviews was with Fred Williamson, the famous football player turned actor and producer, director. And he was promoting some blaxploitation movie that was coming out on VHS.
Right.
And I spoke with him on the phone, but when I called him, he picked up and said, "Hello, Doug. This is the Hammer." I was just like, "Oh man, you're great. You're great." And he was great. He was a great interview. And
did you have to review any of those straight to video erotic baby blues?
That's I love that stuff. That was my bread and butter at the magazine. I started a page in the back of the magazine in the review section that was dedicated to sort of the direct-to-video, we called them Skinemax movies,
right.
But also like the really kind of grotesque exploitation movies. I mean, I was all in on that stuff.
Okay, but you segued the Video Review magazine experience into your Entertainment Weekly experience, and you got to chat with a young Quentin Tarantino who worked at a video rental store.
He did,
famously enough.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but I'm wondering, so like, if the only movie he's got under his belt is Reservoir Dogs, like you're in early, right? Because I didn't watch. I rented it. My local video guy says you're gonna love this movie. I miss the local video guys. Like I remember that day. Like he's like, I never heard of Reservoir Dogs, and he held it up and he says, you'd love this, and I rented it and I loved it. And we don't have that guy anymore. But you were in there before Pulp Fiction. That's cool, man.
Yeah, I mean that was the beauty of that magazine. I mean we called a lot of stuff really early. We had a really good team.
You had a couple of critics I was going to ask you about, Owen and Lisa.
Yes.
So these are they had huge clout.
They did. And, Owen still does. Owen's writing for Variety now. Lisa I think she's retired or semi-retired. I still keep in touch with both, mostly with Owen. Owen Gleiberman,
right.
And he's still watching 10 movies a week or whatever it is and writing about them.
Amazing here. So, but you do make your way to Spin. So, why do you? What happens with this move from?
It was just a step up. I went from being a senior editor at Entertainment Weekly to executive editor, the number 2 job at Spin, and then eventually I took over Spin after some, nonsense that was going on. But so Spin. I was there during sort of I guess they called it like the rebirth of rock and roll with bands like
the Meet
White
Me in the
Stripes.
Bathroom stuff.
Yeah, White Stripes, Interpol, Strokes, all those bands in the early 2000s.
Yeah. It's all this good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, my boy, he's 10. He asked me, my dad, just the other day, he goes, Dad, and it's weird how this stuff works. He goes, do you know the song Maps by Yeah Yeah Yeahs? It's like, and I'm like, yeah, like I start singing it. I'm like, I love that song so much. And it's apparently kids his age. It's made some comeback in some format. Like I don't know if it's in some kind of meme tied to Maps by Yeah Yeah Yeahs is making the rounds.
I totally get where you're coming from. I have a 17-year-old daughter who will play stuff from her from Spotify on her iPhone in the car, and I'll say, "How do you know this?
Yeah.
How do you know the Cocteau Twins?
Right.
How do you know Diane Tward? I don't know if you know them, but that's weird stuff.
Yeah, from Belgium or something.
No,
right?
they're from South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
right.
she's playing all this, and Bjork and Massive Attack and Portishead. I'm like, oh, you're a cool kid. Too bad you're like, it's 30 years later.
Well, they have every song at their fingertips, right?
They do.
Where we had to some guy had to kind of teach you about, like that Video Star guy had to tell me about the Reservoir Dogs. It was like you needed sort of that gatekeeper to curate things and kind of show you way, which is what these magazines often did, right? Like
that's
Spin.
what we tried to do.
That's what you did. And so tell me about, like, I don't know, like the White Stripes. I mean, Jack is still touring, like Jack White Stripes, essentially is what Dave Hodge called him the other day when he was in the basement. But you were the forefront covering White Stripes.
Yeah, it's so funny when I think about it now. All of these bands like the White Stripes and the Strokes, I mean, they're classic rock bands now. I mean, they really are. They are the classic rock bands, the Arcade Fire. I mean, Interpol is playing now, and they're all playing like I think Interpol was playing the 30th anniversary of one of their albums. It's like that's been 30 years already. Or 20 years. 20. It boggles the mind.
Boggles the mind. Mark Weisblot, correspondent for Toronto Mike, was telling me that the previous Spin editor got let go for putting Beyonce on the cover, the top 25 under 25. And apparently that wasn't on brand for Spin. So I don't know how much of that.
How do you know all this?
Well, that's my correspondent, Mark.
Yeah, that was an interesting time. I was hired by the editor-in-chief at the time, this woman named Saya Michael, who's now at the New York Times. Okay. She's a big culture editor there. And the magazine went through a corporate transition when we had new owners come in, and the new owners sort of swept out a bunch of people, including Saya, and I was left, and they brought in a guy from Blender magazine, and I guess it was either his mandate or his own doing that he decided to take the magazine in a more sort of populist direction and put Beyonce on one of the covers.
Right.
And the readers revolted. They just didn't believe that she belonged on the cover of Spin, because Spin had an identity as an alternative music magazine. And, Beyonce's a great artist, don't get me wrong, but was she the appropriate artist for the cover of Spin at that time? No, she was not. So, he lasted a couple of months, and then I was sort of brought up to right the ship a little bit.
And that's a cool time. I mean, post 9/11, when we talked about that great book, Meet Me in the Bathroom. But yeah, the rebirth of rock and roll. I remember it well. Like, are we going to get another rebirth? Is there one on the horizon? It feels like rock's pretty. I hope pretty
so.
Sleepy right now.
It is very sleepy, and that's too bad. No, it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it depresses me. I mean, I like what I like. I'm not a big fan of modern contemporary pop music, and I don't mind saying that, but
you're not a big Sabrina Carpenter fan, or
no, I can't. I don't think I've heard one of her songs.
You know what's funny? This name is I listened to an indie cast. I listened to a bunch of. I've heard that name referenced a million times, and then I heard the fun fact: Sabrina Carpenter's aunt is Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart Simpson.
Right.
This is a fun fact, and now you have my attention because I still love my Simpsons.
I'll tell you, I like the Olivia Rodrigo song that rips off
the vampire.
The one that rips off the Elvis Costello song, "Brutal."
Okay.
And I think I like it because it rips off Elvis Costello.
Right. But Sabrina Carpenter, I can name her song. I never heard of it. But then my 8-year-old daughter watched a Sabrina Carpenter Christmas special on Netflix. And I'm like, so this is on, and I'm just in the room on my laptop, whatever. I look over, oh, so that's what a Sabrina Carpenter looks like. And actually, it was kind of a self-deprecating, tongue-in-cheek, kind of a funny little thing. Actually, I didn't hate this thing. It was kind of interesting. But it's like, oh, so that's Sabrina. Like, there she is. Like, this is a real person, not just this name and espresso that you kind of hear in the wild.
Right, right.
But I never encountered any, because I don't tune in Kiss 92.5. Like, so I don't encounter this music in the wild. But there it was. You know?
I encounter it in the wild because I always Shazam whenever I'm in a store or an unfamiliar place and I hear music. I'm just curious to see what it is because even DJs don't sort of back announce what songs are anymore.
That's been ticking me off for like 25 years now.
They have one job.
Okay, so I produce Humble and Fred show, and just this morning they were talking about the night John Lennon was killed and what New York radio sounded like, and they're talking about it. And then Howard's explaining, like, they didn't have two songs in a row. Like, they'd intro a song, they'd outro that song, then they'd intro the next song. Like, nowadays, what do they call it? There's a name for this, a sweep or something. They call it a sweep, where 3 songs in a row, and you're lucky if you hear a human being. But I missed somebody telling me, what am I listening to? Maybe give me a fun fact or something, like this band's out of New York, and give me something.
I remember being back in New York, driving around with my family, and hearing, like you said, like 3 or 4 songs in a row.
Right.
And at the end of the 4th song, the DJ or whomever was on the radio said, tweet to 892 to find out what we just played. I'm like, I'm in my car. You want me to tweet?
Right. No, that's right. Right. Well, it's times of change. I'm almost mildly surprised we even have music radio anymore. It's like, why would it? Like you said, how old are your kids?
So 17.
17. Like, why would? Because I got a 20-year-old and a almost 23-year-old. Like, why would a 17-year-old want to like have this unprogrammable iPhone or whatever, where they don't think these songs are gonna come on? They can't pause. They can't skip. They can't choose what it is. Like, it doesn't. I don't know why you'd ever want that. Like, we had no choice.
Well, I think it's the function of having a 20-year-old car, and that's all I can get in my car, unless my daughter hooks up her Spotify to the radio.
You get a Bluetooth solution or something.
Exactly.
But that's it, right? It's the cars that haven't quite made it easy to Bluetooth, and that's it. That's all that's left.
That's it.
And then you have to stop down for 3.5-minute ad breaks or 5-minute ad breaks. It's like, oh my goodness.
I can't imagine. Like, what's the point anymore? Really.
What's radio doing, man? Doug, we got to solve radio's problem. Okay, so let's get you to TV Guide, and we're still in New York. Is that right?
Yes. In fact, I was born there and bred there. I went to NYU, so I went to school there. So I actually never left the city until I moved to Toronto. My wife is from here, which is
so it wasn't the Toronto Star. It was your wife who brought you to Toronto.
No, it was a combination of things. So TV Guide was a fun gig. Didn't last very long. Lasted like 2.5 years. And then I went over to Condé Nast, which is publisher of Vogue and the New Yorker and Glamour and all these magazines. And I worked in their special interest publications department, which is the place where we put together these really expensive magazines, magazines that were like anthologies of the best recipes from Gourmet magazine, greatest crime stories from Vanity Fair magazine, things like that. And I also worked on tribute magazines like the 75th birthday of Paul McCartney, Martin Luther King memorial issue, Muhammad Ali memorial issue, things like that. That was fun.
This did pretty well, right?
They did, and I had to curate a bunch of stories from various magazines within the company and just sort of put them together, and that was fun until they decided they weren't selling enough, and they closed the department. So at that point, that takes us almost to Toronto. Okay. So that was during the Trump era, the first Trump era, and my wife didn't really like her job that much. Let me rephrase that. She was getting a little burnt out from her job.
We'll fix it in post, Doug.
Yeah. She's getting a little burnt out from her job, and we were just getting tired of the city and tired of Trump, and we had a house. We owned a house, and we figured, let's do it. Let's just make the leap. We have a bunch of family and friends here because my wife is from here. So we did it. We sold a house, moved up in July 2019.
Now, I'm just curious because and I don't know how you lean politically. I have no idea. Okay, but if Hillary Clinton wins the 2016 election, you still come to Canada?
Probably not. Probably not.
That's what I thought maybe, but I don't want to make assumptions over here, Doug.
Yeah. So we're here and we love it.
All right. Well, New York's loss is our gain. We got ourselves a Doug Broad, and you came here, okay? And I'm curious now, but so they shuttered this, I guess, but this Condé Nast, these bookazines, we'll call them, okay? Like today, those would just be Taylor Swift magazines, right?
You'll go to any newsstand now, and they're almost, I would say, 80% bookazines. So they're thriving. They weren't thriving for Condé Nast, though, and I think it might have been just because their magazines were pretty highbrow, and they weren't really trying to capture the newsstand buyer with these really interesting, provocative covers. They might have been a little too genteel.
Right. I can just imagine that the marketplace for like Taylor Swift history magazines or whatever would be enormous. There seems to be an insatiable appetite there.
There is. And
you want to do one with me? You think we can make some money here?
The Toronto Star just did one, and it's coming out pretty soon. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever it takes, right? We guys love whatever it takes to pay David Ryder's salary. We're gonna do. If that's Taylor Swift books and yours too, of course. Okay, so let's get you to the Toronto Star. So you guys decide because your wife is burnt out and she's from here. So she's from Toronto, right?
She's from Toronto.
That's not code for like she's from Aurora.
No,
or
she's
something.
she's from the beaches.
Okay. It's like the opposite end of the city is here. Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys move. So are you on the East End?
We're on the East End. We're in Cabbagetown.
Okay.
And so we decided to move here. We had nowhere to live. We were literally couch surfing and house sitting for friends for a couple of months. We had all of our belongings in a storage facility. Like everything was just packed in a storage unit.
Right.
And we looked for a house. We found a house we liked, and we got it pretty quickly. And that all, the stars were all aligned for that. But then COVID hit. So we had like 4 or 5 months of like really great times in the city, and then we were, confined to our house for a couple of years.
Oh, I remember. I was doing episodes. I remember the pivot because all my guests had to do what you did right now, which is you had to come in the basement. Even if you're over in Cabbagetown, you got to come visit. And then like on a dime, it was like I remember Peter Gross showed up on the Monday after. So I guess the day we pulled our kids out of school was Friday the 13th of March 2020. And then I remember Monday because I had a recurring event where Peter Gross would visit me. You're from New York, but Pete, you have to take my word for it, Doug. Peter Gross is a legend. Okay. And I was like, I remember having a chat with Peter. I'm like, oh, Peter, you can't do this anymore. Like, I'm going to get in trouble with my wife. Like, you can't come over anymore. Like, this was such a scary time, but it wasn't long before I realized I could record in the backyard from like 20 feet away. And that's what sort of saved me. It was like, I can still do this in person. I just set up outside.
That's great.
And that's what I did.
You have a very quiet street here, I noticed.
Yeah, it's pretty quiet. But you know what? I like that ambient, noise for a recording. But by the way, we have an answer on the live stream, live.torontomike.com. Earlier, we were struggling. What the hell was the name of that musical that Bob Wagner is playing guitar for the members of Queen? It was We Will Rock You.
It just came to me.
I'm like, where was that? Like about half an hour ago here. Okay, so now we've got you at the Toronto Star, right? Or almost.
Well, almost. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I came here, I was in the middle of writing the first book, the Kiss, Cheap Trick, Aerosmith, and Stars book. So I had gotten that deal while I worked at Condé Nast. And I started the book in New York, and I finished it here during COVID. But in fact, I brought 2 books for you.
Wow.
Here's the first one.
Okay, a little weird. Again, I got a silly question. I have not read this yet, okay? And I am a titch younger than you. But here it is. So it's called They Seem a Little Weird.
They just seem a little weird.
Okay, They Just Seem a Little Weird. Right, I put the glass on. How Kiss, Cheap Trick, Aerosmith, so far, I'm very familiar. I've seen, so I'm very familiar with these 3 bands. But then, and Stars with a Z. We're in Canada now, I say
yes.
Z. And Stars remade rock and roll. As I'm sitting here with you now, and I'm not sure I know a song by a band called Stars with a Z.
Yeah, that's a trick with this book.
Okay.
So if I can just go back a little bit. So the idea behind this book was to write a book about '70s hard rock, zeroing in on 3 bands that I loved, and those are Kiss, Cheap Trick, and Aerosmith.
Right.
And Stars I really, really like. Now, the reason why I wrote about all 4 of them is because they're all connected, and they were all interconnected throughout their careers.
Okay.
And in particular, all 4 of these bands, on Gene Simmons' first solo album in 1978, when Kiss did those 4 solo albums, Gene Simmons had Joe Perry from Aerosmith play on it as a guest, Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick play on it, and Richie Rano from Stars played on that record. So the idea behind the book was sort of looking at 70s rock through the POV of these 4 bands, and how they intertwined. And there are a lot of connections between them.
Does Stars have a hit I might hear on Q107 or something?
They had an almost hit called Cherry Baby, and it went to number 30 on Billboard's Top 40, and didn't go any further, and they never had a hit again.
And Boom's not playing that song by Stars.
Probably not.
It's my own ignorance that because I didn't live it, like I kind of need a radio hit to draw me in, but not always. But now that I have this book, I will learn a great deal more about Stars. So I like a Stars, but it's our Canadian Stars with an S.
Yes.
Not this Stars with a Z.
You might like if you like the other 3 bands, you might like Stars with a Z.
Well, I was a big Aerosmith fan from the get-go because they had a bunch of songs I'd listened to in the late. They had like "Dude Looks Like a Lady" and then "Pump" came out. I liked it very much, and then I would go back and I would hear the they had the Run DMC single, and then it would draw me back. And then of course the best song ever on a sports montage is "Dream On." Like if you get a good sports montage and you set it to "Dream On," it's next level epic.
Well, that song is great. There's no, it's one of those undeniable songs.
You want to sing it with me?
No.
Okay, good answer. Okay, I always thought, I have a lot of, I'll say like a lot of guys in their 60s come over to kick out the jams, and they all rave about Kiss, and I realized, you had to be there. Like you had to be a teenager in the 70s, I think.
You did.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
And then who else?
With the makeup.
And Cheap Trick. Like I learned about Cheap Trick from Fast Times at Ridgemont High because the guy was trying to sell those tickets and he was going down like Dream Police. He was singing all this stuff. And then I saw them because I went to see Pearl Jam, one of my favorite bands of all time, at Molson Park in Barrie in '98. And Eddie loved Cheap Trick and he had them open up for him. But you'll laugh when I tell you basically the first Cheap Trick song I heard on the radio. You might even be able to guess.
Was The Flame.
No, it was the Don't Be Cruel cover of Elvis Presley's Don't Be Cruel on 680 CFTR. So I'm going to read this book. They just seem a little weird. And I bet you it's as good as Bob Wagner says it is. So we're going to do that.
Bob's a big fan.
Bob's a big fan. And we're almost at your new book, but I need to know what brought you, like, how'd you get the gig at the Toronto Star?
Oh, so it was during the pandemic. I just started answering every ad that I saw that seemed appealing to me, and one that did was from the Star. They were looking for a team editor, and I made it through.
Well, they needed a guy like you. They needed a guy who can say, I interviewed Quentin Tarantino before Pulp Fiction, right? That's the key caveat there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was fortunate enough. I think I was wrapping up this book, the first book, when I got that job. So I was very happy about that.
Okay, so I mean, I'm a big Toronto Star guy because it was the paper on my kitchen table growing up. So that's why it was such an honor for you to approve the Gilles LeBlanc story, which you see hangs in the studio here. That's how proud I am of that. That was pretty cool. Now, bunch of people I've talked to who sort of got like pushed aside, but I still see in print. A couple of guys I'll shout out: Peter Howell and Ben Rayner. Okay, so these are 2 guys who do freelance work now, but are no longer full-time employees. But you'll still see some Rayner and Howell in the Toronto Star.
You definitely will. In fact, Peter writes pretty regularly for me, and I'm his editor. So yeah.
Okay. We call that pension-friendly rates, I think is what we call that. But the gentleman who I've had over recently and had a great chat with, who doesn't seem to be involved anymore, is Rob Salem. Rob Salem.
Not familiar with Rob Salem.
Yeah, you're too fresh.
I'm too new.
You're too new here. I'm here to lobby to get some more Rob Salem back in my Toronto Star. But it's cool what you're doing there, and things are, rapidly evolving over there. Revolving Door, and Jordan Bitov is kind of, I don't know, hoping for a bailout maybe or something. But long may you run. Like, I love the fact that we still have the Toronto Star, and again, I'm gonna have Ed Keenan on in 3 weeks' time. He comes over every quarter. And I love seeing David Ryder at my events. And there's a whole bunch of other Toronto Star people that I just dig. And you're doing great work over there.
Yeah, it's a great place. I'm really happy I'm there.
And I just read today your former stomping grounds. And I don't know, since you joined during the pandemic, maybe you never got there. I have no idea. But 1 Yonge Street's going to be demolished soon.
I actually made it there once to the office. But yeah, we're in beautiful digs now in the Well. Yeah. On Spadina and Front Street, and it's gorgeous, a gorgeous building.
Yeah, Keenan comes in need full reports of what's going on at the Well there, but
great food court.
Great, you know what? That's all you journalists need, I think, is. But a lot of you have a different role there because your role is editor.
I'm a team editor.
Team editor, okay.
Yeah.
But when you're a guy like an Ed Keenan, I'm sure you never go to the office, right? Like, what? I don't even know why you'd go to the office.
We're all encouraged to go there at least twice a week, which I do, and I think most people do.
Okay. Well, you got a good food court, so it's not so bad.
And we have just it's a very sort of cush place. I like it.
Okay, so now we're going to dive into the world of Anton LaVey, and we're going to talk about the new book. But first, I'm going to give you a few gifts real quick because you gave me a gift, and I got a little hint of another one coming. Maybe I'll give you the gifts, then you give me that gift, and then we dive in.
Okay,
Doug, in that order. Okay, we're editing on the fly here. You know what that's like.
So these are gifts for me.
Gifts for you.
Right
so
in front of me.
The one in your hand, I feel like it's like a Christmas morning or something. That measuring tape in your hand is courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home, and they're pillars of this community. And I feel like it's a good start, too. We're going to talk about, the founder of the Church of Satan here. And I feel like there's a Ridley Funeral Home, and they're good people. They have a podcast called Life's Undertaking, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, great. You see, I like well-named, well-titled things, and that's a great title.
Ridley Funeral Home?
No, Life's Undertaking.
Oh yeah, I got to keep up. You're playing 3D chess here. I'm playing checkers back here. Okay, so yeah, Life's Undertaking, named by another Doug. Brad Jones named that, and it's great. So I want to give you a speaker. It's in your hand right now. That's courtesy of Moneris. It's a wireless speaker.
That's awesome.
And with that speaker, though, before you go off and listen to some Harlem Nocturne or something, you have to promise me that you're going to check out Season 7 of Yes, We Are Open, which is an award-winning podcast hosted by Al Grego from Moneris, where Al went to Winnipeg to collect some great stories from small business owners, inspiring stories, and we learned about their triumphs, their tribulations, and basically learned how these entrepreneurial people succeed in 2024. He also made a pit stop in Oakville because he talked to Ty the Christmas Guy, him and his wife run Retro Festive, which is a store. It's like a pop culture, you'd love it, a pop culture, but it's like a 12-month-a-year Christmas store. It's made for people like Brian Dunn, I think, so shout out to Brian if he's listening at home. But he was the special guest, and that was the season finale of Yes, We Are Open, so that's what you're going to listen to if you're a wireless speaker there.
Okay.
And that very aforementioned Ty the Christmas Guy gave everybody a gift at TMLX 17, which was, it was a week ago this past Saturday, so about 8 days ago. And that took place at Palma's Kitchen in Mississauga. And I hope you're sitting down, Doug. You are. I have in my freezer upstairs a frozen lasagna for you from Palma Pasta.
Oh, my God.
That's why you're here, right? Who tipped you off?
Jill? No one. I
had no idea.
I love lasagna, so.
All right, and last but not least, I have fresh craft beer for you from Great Lakes Brewery.
Ooh.
And they brew that right here in Southern Etobicoke, and that's delicious. They have a podcast called Between Two Fermenters, and I highly recommend that as well. That's a great title.
Another great title. Yeah.
It's all about the title here. I got to rework my Toronto mic.
I'm a big punster. I'm big with my dad jokes.
Okay, you know who you would like? Ron Sexsmith. I follow him on, now I follow him on Blue Sky, and he's all about the dad joke puns. So
that's me.
Never ending stream.
Oh, so I have a present for you.
Yeah, please.
My present is a copy of Born with a Tail, signed by me.
Oh my goodness. Does that increase the value or decrease the value?
Decreases.
It was. I could have resold it like for just like 10% less than the sticker price, but with that, you writing all over it now, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna see if I can white that out. Okay, so I'm gonna read it again. Born with a Tale: The Devilish Life and Wicked Times of Anton Szandor LaVey, and he's the founder of the Church of Satan. So why did you want to write this book, Doug?
Well, I wanted to come up with another idea to write another book after I finished my first one, and I had a few ideas that were not accepted by my editor at my publishing house, and I suggested this one, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do this one." Like I said earlier, I've always been fascinated by the macabre and horror movies and sci-fi and fantasy and comic books, and he was always kind of in my peripheral vision. And in the 80s is kind of when I discovered him. He was kind of beloved by the rock and roll underground. He kind of had a renaissance after the Satanic Panic happened in the 80s. So
Of course.
that's when he kind of came on my radar, and I was always fascinated by him. And there was one previous bio written, there were two previous bios written about him. One was in 74 by a member of the church, and it was very biased, and the guy who wrote it said that LaVey fed him lies. So it's a very rare book. It's out of print. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, LaVey's then longtime companion wrote a biography of him with, obviously a lot of his help since she was living with him at the time. And the book is really good. It's called The Secret Life of a Satanist by Blanche Barton. And, it's one-sided. It's his side. And there'd never been a real deep dive sort of journalistic look at his life. And it was something that I feel like if I'm going to spend 2 years researching and writing, I have to be really interested in the subject. And he interested me. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, you have a full-time job, Doug.
I do. And that was the thing. So for the first book, I didn't have a full-time job for much of it. So it was actually kind of easy and leisurely to actually write that book.
Because that becomes your job.
Right. And I joke all the time that when I was writing this book, I literally had 2 full-time jobs for 2 years.
Yeah, and it's like you have to reintroduce yourself to your teenage daughter.
I know, and I had no social life. I didn't go to movies. I didn't go to many concerts. I just was in my my basement man cave writing this stuff.
And you said it took a couple of years to research and write this book?
A little bit under.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So I have a few questions about this, but you alluded to the fact that your editor rejected the first ideas. Would you share? Is there any chance I could get one of those topics out of you that was rejected?
You know what? I don't want to share them only because
you have them in the back pocket.
They're in the back pocket.
They might come out.
And they might come out again. You're right. I'm sorry about that.
No, you know what? I actually don't blame you at all because you don't want to burn that idea.
I'll give you one that I really like, but I have a feeling the audience is really small. So in the vein of my first book, looking at 4 artists that were connected, I was thinking of writing a book about, I don't know if it translates at all into Canadian, but Dick Clark from American Bandstand and Casey Kasem from America's Top 40. Well, I wanted to do a dual biography of them because they were connected in many fundamental ways as well. And I thought that it would be an interesting look at sort of how rock and roll and how pop music became sort of the monoculture for a while.
And you think that it's too small an audience? Because that feels like 2 very famous people.
It is. I think it might be too old an audience. I'm not sure if anyone under the age of 45 really cares.
I feel like I read lately that there's
50.
There might be a mild Casey Kasem revival going on, like some streaming service or something is now airing. I forget the details now because so much going on, but somehow there's suddenly people are listening to older episodes of America Top 40. Anyways, I'm throwing this out there that I like this idea.
I do too. I have a feeling maybe I'm too late now. Someone's going to pitch it to somebody else.
Do I have to fix this in post? Is this one of those, people are going to listen to
No.
this and they're going to get beeps, and then they'll be writing me notes like, what got beeped there? And I'm like, I'm not telling, go ask
So
Doug.
yeah, I mean, this is my obsessions are kind of like off the beaten path. You know, they're not the stories that are going to sell millions of copies of books.
I can relate to that. Like some of the areas I go deepest into is like sometimes I wonder like maybe I am the only human who cares about this, but I don't have an editor I got to impress. Like I'm gonna just go dive into this area that I'm interested in, and I don't care if anyone else follows me.
Yeah, and when you're writing a book, that's all you care about. It's like because you want to be entertained and you want to be enlightened as you're researching it. So you know, when you're doing the investigative kind of reporting, it's like you get these eureka moments. You end up, you know, talking to someone who you never thought you'd get. You end up finding someone through somebody else, and this person gives you like amazing quotes. So it's like there's something about the process that's really invigorating.
Amazing. Would you? Again, I urge people to read the book and learn more about LaVey. But can you give us like like what led him down this path? Like, what is the catalyst that causes him to, invent the Church of Satan?
Well, to go back, he was born in 1930 in Chicago, and he was Jewish, and he moved to San Francisco, the San Francisco Northern California area with his parents as a boy, and grew up there. And he too was like me. He was a big horror nerd, and he was into film noir, and he was into the supernatural and the occult. And as he got older, he sort of built this world around him. I mean, he looked the part. At one point he shaved his head and he had a goatee, and he lived with a pet lion in his house, and he lived in this big black town, this big black Victorian mansion.
Right.
And he basically lived the aesthetic of the occult. And he decided at one point he wanted to start a church, but it wasn't really it wasn't a devil worshiping church. It was actually a totally atheistic church. Didn't believe in anything. Only believed in man as God, man as his own God, and it was all about self-empowerment. It was all about manipulating others to get what you want. And it was very much a selfish, and he admits it, a selfish kind of greedy philosophy. And people were into it. People, went to his house, and this is the bizarre thing. So this is 1966 and 67. People are going to his house for rituals. So like he's getting strangers paying $2 or whatever it is, or whatever the membership was, to come to his house and do these rituals with naked women on, the fireplace mantle, with chalices and swords and all this stuff. And it's just this remarkable story about this guy who just created his own sort of his own environment, his own aesthetic.
Well, I have a note here I took when I was going through the book. The Satanic Bible, work or shoot, okay? So one of the things that strikes me is like, I can't tell he's like the world's greatest showman or whatever. Like there's some grift at play here, and how much of this is like sincere? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and I hope I answered it somewhat in the book, but it's kind of hard to really nail down. I mean, throughout his life, he made up a lot of stories. He claimed to have been a carny,
like a lion tamer, right?
Lion tamer. Yeah. He played the calliope at carnivals. He knew all the sideshow attractions. He claimed to have had an affair with Marilyn Monroe when he was 18 years old, and he was accompanying her in a burlesque house. He was playing the organ. And he said a lot of things that are are disprovable. He also claimed that he was on the San Francisco police force as a police photographer,
Right.
and he shot accidents and the aftermaths of murders and all this other stuff.
But that would be
Um,
something easy to prove.
Yeah, and
False, right.
apparently there's no records
Right.
at the San Francisco Police Department that he actually did this. He also claimed to have been a Ghostbuster. So when the San Francisco Police Department would get all these calls about like strange noises in someone's attic, he would have to go out and investigate. And he knew that it was all baloney, and he said that this stuff is all baloney. But then it kind of sort of took over his life. Obviously, he wrote a bunch of books. He wrote the Satanic Bible, which was his first one, and it was mostly a collection of essays and rules. The 9 satanic statements, and it was a bestseller. It has sold over 1 million copies since
Wow.
it went into print and hasn't been out of print. Then his second book was a book called The Complete Witch, and that was more of like a guide for women to sort of trap the man they want, to get the man they want. And then his third book was called The Satanic Rituals, which was kind of a companion to the first book, all about the rituals that you can perform to, manipulate people to your benefit and to, gain more wealth, gain more sexual attraction, those kinds of things.
And I mean, and he walked the walk. I mean, there's a satanic marriage. There's a satanic baptism I'm reading about. Like, this guy's, he's acting on this.
But at that point, that was very early on, after he created the religion. He did this first satanic marriage, and that was a sham, and that's kind of the opening of the book.
Right.
And he admitted that it was just these are things that he did for publicity.
Right.
They were kind of like these like bohemian happenings in a way.
Right. And for guys my age who we'll talk about satanic panic, where it's kind of where we get introduced to this whole universe. But I mean, we're talking about a famous man, because in a monolithic culture, getting on the Tonight Show is massive.
Yeah, he was on the Tonight Show, and he was on the cover of Look magazine, which was Life magazine's competitor. So he was pretty well known. He was on a bunch of talk shows. He was on
Steve Allen
Steve
show?
Allen show a couple
Sure.
of times. He was on one episode with Jack Palance and Charles Nelson Riley, which I none of these things exist anymore. They've all been taped over. But man, some of those things I'd love to see.
Yeah, that's a shame we did that. Like, I know, you can't get there from here or whatever, but the fact that so much, even the Tonight Show, apparently a whole whack of the Tonight Show got taped over.
Yeah, that one, his episode is not available anywhere.
Not even Retro Ontario's got these episodes archived, so that's how you know these things are tough to get. Okay, I'm going to bring in the Rob Proust question that I put off, because if I forget it, he'll be very mad at me, and you don't want Rob Proust to be mad at you. So.
Okay.
He co-wrote Romantic Traffic for the Spoons, and I realized as a New Yorker who just arrived, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
You're going to be like, oh, what's a spoon and what's Romantic Traffic? And you'd be well within your right to do so.
No, I've heard of the Spoons.
Okay, Nova Heart, but you didn't, yeah. So Nova Heart is Gord's song, and then the co-writing is on Romantic Traffic, but I digress. Rob Proust writes, I've been interested this year in a writer named Carl Abrahamson. A lot of syllables there. Okay. He wrote about Anton LaVey in a chapter of his book, Occulture, and I found it very intriguing. I've been interested in learning, studying spiritual and occult stuff for 30 years. And that's a whole other conversation. Okay, Rob, I'm going to have that conversation with you on Toast in January, okay? So get ready. So he says, I can't wait for Doug as an FOTM, but what can you share with me about like Carl Abrahamson and what he's written about Anton LaVey?
Well, Carl has done a lot to sort of bring LaVey back into the culture from that book. He also published a book of photographs of Anton LaVey and Jane Mansfield, the actress, when they had this connection in 1967 for a few months before she died. And there was this whole story about how he put a curse on her boyfriend at the time, Sam Brody, which led to the car accident that took both their lives. But this guy, this photographer named Walter Fisher, took all these great publicity shots of them. And Carl collected a lot of them in a book called California Infernal. And he also put together a book called Debauched. And it was a collection of all of these satanic men's magazines from the 60s. And like, there's a lot of pubic hair, a lot of topless women. They're just like these cheesy magazines that were like third-rate Playboys that focused on the occult, because the occult was big back then. So anyway, so Carl is an expert, no doubt, and I reached out to him, actually interviewed him for the book, and he was very frank with me, and he was very candid, and, you know, he actually was, his first marriage, he was married in the church in the house by LaVey, who had given up marrying people at the time, but made an exception for Carl.
Is there anyone you really wanted to talk about when you're doing your research for this book who refused to talk to you?
Well, yeah, LaVey's two daughters didn't want to talk to me, Carla and Zena. Zena actually was on a recent episode of Jordan Peterson's podcast, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating interview. It was like, I think like 2 months ago.
Is she the one who was baptized in
yes,
she was the one.
She was the one who was baptized in the satanic baptism. But the one of the more interesting, I'll say, people I didn't get, I tried to get his grandson, Stanton, who's Zena's son. Now, Stanton is, he would be in his early 40s now, I believe. But I actually had scheduled an interview with him, I guess it was two Decembers ago, and we were going to do a Zoom interview, and he never showed up to the Zoom interview. So I emailed him, and I said, you know, let me know if there's a better time for you, and I'd be happy to, you know, call you back or reschedule, whatever. Never heard back from him. And then like 2 days later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance, I got an email, and it was like, did you know that Stanton died?
Wow.
I'm like,
in
no.
early 40s.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And he said, yeah, he died on, I think it was December 14th, and that was the day of our interview.
Wow.
So he died the same day we were supposed to talk, which was kind of chilling to me.
That's chilling to hear about even now, especially because this wasn't, you know, a 96-year-old man you were going to talk to.
No, and I actually spoke with his wife for the book, and she's quoted a few times. But no, he had a back problem, and he had surgery on his back, and I think it was a painkiller issue.
Oh no. Well,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that was an interview that never happened, obviously. But okay. By the way, you mentioned Jane Mansfield, so now I feel like obligated as host of. I've decided host of Canada's favorite podcast. Can I run with that? You're the editor.
It is. Yeah. If
okay.
yeah.
You know, prove me wrong. Okay. So. Jane Mansfield, if you remember, there's that scene at the 50s diner in Pulp Fiction. And I can't remember, I think Mia Wallace thinks it's Marilyn Monroe. And then she's corrected. No, there's Marilyn Monroe. That's Jane Mansfield. Do you remember this
or
scene?
Or was it Mamie Van Doren?
Oh, am I complaining on my...
It might have been
on my
Mamie
blonde bombshells?
I recently rewatched the first half of that movie.
But there's a Jane Mansfield look-alike servant at that restaurant.
Yeah.
You ever think back, okay, so we were all freaking out in 94 over the $5 shakes. And here we are in 2024, where it's like, that sounds like you can't even get a McDonald's, whatever they're calling. They can't even call it milkshakes, whatever they call their...
McFlurry.
Whatever they call it. You can't get that for $5 anymore.
No.
No, times have changed?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, we'll have more Pulp Fiction references as we go here. By the way, Robert Lawson, who wrote a great book on the Guess Who. So Bob Wagner's got the book on...
and Robert Lawson also wrote a great Cheap Trick book.
Okay, so So Robert Lawson wrote me when he heard you were coming on to say he read your book. He loved it. His mind was blowing that LaVey was Jewish, a Jewish man. You're saying you had an interaction with the great Robert Lawson, or just that
he came to. I did a book signing and an event on the east side, the East End, I should say.
Yeah.
At Queen Books, and he came, and I signed a book for him. He bought a book, and we had been in contact because I used his Cheap Trick book as a source for my book.
Right, for your
My
A Little
first book.
Weird.
For
Okay, look at you know what? It's such a small world, right, Doug? Because
it really is.
I had Randy Bachman on the program, and Randy tells a good story. Good storyteller.
I'm sure he does.
But he embellishes things, okay? And then Robert Lawson, who did write a book on the Guess Who and is friendly with Burton Cummings, he came over here to fact check Randy Bachman. Like, the episode is basically Robert Lawson fact checks Randy Bachman. Quite an episode, and then henceforth we've anointed, or maybe we've appointed Robert Lawson as the official fact checker of the Toronto Mike podcast. So we always joke that if somebody's telling a mistruth or spinning something a little too aggressively, he literally comes out of the bushes like in Field of Dreams, although really it's like The Simpsons where he comes out and fact checks. So it's interesting to hear him and you have some convergence there, and yeah, he loves your book.
Yeah, no, he's been a supporter. He wrote a really nice review of it on, I believe it was on Goodreads, and yeah.
His most recent book is about Little Stevie from the E Street Band.
It is, yeah. He also wrote a book about Nazareth, who I just recently sort of got into.
And This Flight Tonight, which is the big radio hit you hear from Nazareth, right? That's a cover of a Joni Mitchell song.
I know.
I know you know.
Yeah.
I guess I'm talking to there's someone out there.
Yeah. And then, but Love Hurts was the big song in the States first.
But that's a cover too, right?
It is. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, Love Hurts is a big jam too, and co-opted by some advertising campaign because it was selling something in the last 15 years. But maybe all the great songs at some point will be co-opted, except for the Neil Young songs. They won't. This note's for you.
He won't allow it, right?
He won't allow it. Not as long as he's with us. Okay. Oh, and he's married to Daryl Hannah now, and Daryl Hannah's in Kill Bill. Should we shut this down?
Yeah, wow.
Should we shut this down right now?
There's a book here. Somewhere.
If you hang out with me long enough, Doug, you can shadow me. Like, this is my third episode, so I'm a little, I'm enjoying my Great Lakes, and I'm a little bit punchy here. Episode 3 of the day. But literally, all the pieces matter. They all fit together, and that's all this show is. No wonder Gilles brought this great idea to you, okay? Congratulations on approving it. Okay, so Milan heard you were coming over, and he wrote me this great note, and this is going to bring us into the satanic panic I want to talk about. Milan writes, how much of the attention they got, and I'm going to read it verbatim here, how much of the attention they got was due to the rise and fall of the satanic panic and metal music popularity during the 1980s? The mainstream opinion often ties Anton to those two events, and it doesn't seem that his church ever got so much attention again. So maybe this is our gateway to discuss, I came of age in the 80s, the satanic panic of the 1980s.
Okay. Well, to start, you have to go back a little bit because there was a schism in the church.
All right.
In 1975. And sort of LaVey's right-hand man, this guy, Michael Aquino, went off and sort of formed his own church called the Temple of Set. And it was a genuine satanic devil-worshipping sect. Right. LaVey had no time for those kinds of people. He called them occultniks. So, so the church never really recovered after the split. And when the Satanic Panic hit in 1980 with the publication of Michelle Remembers, which was this purported remembrances of a young girl who claimed that her mother was in a satanic cult and abused her, and there was actually a great documentary that recently came out about this. And when that book came out, and it kind of caught on like wildfire, and it led to this whole repressed memory sort of phenomenon where these psychiatrists were drawing out all of these, purported repressed memories of kids being involved in satanic rituals. So it was this whole phenomenon called the satanic ritual abuse. And all of these daycare centers, starting with the McMartin Daycare Center in Los Angeles, they had kids who claimed to have been, involved in satanic rituals with animals and blood and sexual abuse and just all this kind of craziness, which was obviously disprovable, but it sort of caught on throughout the country, and a lot of lives were shattered because of this. LaVey was kind of underground at that point. He was kind of keeping a low profile, and he had asked Zena and Carla to go out and sort of speak on his behalf to defend the Church of Satan, because the Church of Satan had nothing at all to do with this. People claimed to have been Satanists who did this kind of stuff, but they weren't LaVey's Satanists. In fact, in the book Michelle Remembers that came out in 1980, she claimed that there was an organization called the Church of Satan that was part of her abuse, and he said, at that time, his organization had not even come into existence.
Right. So
there's a lot of that kind of nonsense being attributed to LaVey, which he had nothing to do with. So that takes us to the Satanic Panic when, heavy metal was being accused of, warping kids' minds, and even like games like Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And so he basically sort of wrote it out and didn't go public at all, trying to defend the church. And eventually, in fact, when I interviewed Blanche, his longtime companion for the book, she told me that after the Satanic Panic died down, they got a lot more requests for memberships for the Church of Satan, because it basically popularized it. And then she said younger people saw all of this coming up about the Church of Satan, and they were like, oh, this sounds like a pretty cool organization.
It's
and
like an awareness campaign.
Yeah, and it aligns with my beliefs. Basically, I worship myself, and, it's all about, putting yourself first and self-empowerment.
Right.
So, so in a way, the Satanic Panic, when it eventually kind of went away, it kind of left the door open for him to sort of have a renaissance. And in the late 80s, early 90s, the underground culture, at least in America, especially within, with rock and roll bands, rock stars people like, I guess, King Diamond, and, a lot of people on the underground kind of took to LaVey and his philosophy and sort of, brought it back up in fanzines.
Yeah, like these punk scenes. I was reading about that. Resurgence here.
Yeah, so he had a resurgence, and that's kind of when I kind of discovered him.
Sure.
And, he was a hyper-intelligent guy who was really funny. And that's one of his attractions to me, is that he's a really funny writer. So that appealed to a lot of people, and he, made a lot of fans after the Satanic Panic.
Kind of funny, but from your book, I gather kind of nasty too, right? Like he's got this like nasty, funny blend.
Definitely had a nasty streak, and he was accused by his second longtime companion before the woman before Blanche, woman named Diane Haggerty. She accused him of physical abuse, and they divorced. Well, they didn't divorce; they split in a sort of a palimony suit, and basically he was left with not a lot of money after that happened.
Right. Okay. Here, you've been amazing. I know I said I'd take an hour. I'm taking a little more. So,
sure.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do about it, Doug? Okay, you're trapped in the basement now. Here. Okay. So we talked about like Jane Mansfield, like these stars or whatever. But I was reading in your book Sammy Davis Jr. too? Like, so what? Sammy Davis Jr. was his friend or follower? Like, how does he come into this Church of Satan?
Yeah, so that's an interesting kind of wrinkle in the book. So Sammy claimed that he was kind of always into, not always, but in the late 60s he was into Satanism, and he was going to satanic orgies, which he actually details in his own books. And in 1973, he made a made-for-TV movie in America called Poor Devil, and it was a comedy with Jack Klugman and Christopher Lee, and he plays this emissary from hell who was sent by Satan to sign up some souls, and Jack Klugman's one of the souls he wants to sign up. And it was supposed to be a pilot, like a feature-length pilot to a TV series. Didn't go to series, but when it did play on television, the church found out about it, and the church were actually pleased with what they saw, because the movie actually mentions the Church of Satan in downtown San Francisco. So they were happy for the promotion.
That's earned media.
That is definitely earned media.
Like my cover on the Together section of the Toronto Star.
It might even be unintentional product placement. So Sammy did this movie, and LaVey had his guy Michael Aquino reach out to Sammy and see if he would accept honorary warlock certificate in the Church of Satan, and he said yeah. And then they became aligned for a while. They became friendly. There are photos you can find on the internet of Sammy with LaVey. And Sammy basically said after a while he was part of a coven that didn't turn out too well or something, and he kind of lost his taste for Satanism. But funnily enough, I was watching the Jerry Seinfeld show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, and he had Eddie Murphy on, and Eddie Murphy sort of went on this whole thing about Sammy Davis Jr. being a Satanist, just kind of randomly. And Eddie Murphy told Seinfeld that, Sammy, he was a dark guy, and he really believed in the devil. He believed there was a lot of evil in the world. So there's a lot of signs pointing to the fact that Sammy was really into this.
The Candyman said that? That's Herschel Kristofsky, the rabbi and father of Krusty the Clown. The Candyman said that?
Simpsons trivia is not my forte.
It's okay. So like I said, this is a podcast with a target audience of one. And so I'm not even recording this, Doug. I literally just wanted to chat with you about this guy. This guy who I knew, like, when I saw the picture of the cover of the book and I saw him, and you mentioned the shaved head and the goatee there, I recognized this guy. I remember the Satanic Panic of the 80s. It seemed like, I don't know, Sally Jesse Raphael and all, this whole, I don't know, Phil Donahue. Caller, you there, caller? Like,
and Geraldo Rivera.
Geraldo, that's the big one, right?
Yeah.
So did Geraldo, that was, like, I mean, I know he broke into the vault at Capone and he couldn't find Jack, so they all went home. Shout out to Maestro Fresh West and Joe Goldberg. But this has been amazing. So I really do find this guy fascinating. Like, I knew nothing about him. Like, I'm almost surprised, like, he's a real guy. Like, it just seems kind of surreal when you're coming up in the 80s and this thing's here, and then it sort of disappears forever. And to your book is well researched. It's fascinating. It's not a dry read. It's got there's humor. It's a great read. And I wonder if I can nail the title before I ask you my final question here. Born with a Tail. Tail. See, this is clever too, much like Life's Undertaking in Between Two Fermenters. Born with a Tail, the devilish life and wicked times of Anton Szandor, and that's how you pronounce that middle name, right? Szandor?
Correct.
Okay, because there's an S that. Okay. LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan. And I highly recommend everybody reads it. But in this book, you find out, like, LaVey, just a regular guy, he liked going to Olive Gardens, right? And I was thinking, okay, so you're an American who's only a recent new Canadian, if you're a new member of our community here. We don't have any Olive Gardens in this GTA. We used to have them, though. So before you got here, There was one near Sherway Gardens I would go to. I really liked the Olive Garden. And then all of a sudden, our Olive Gardens were gone. But I consume, like many Canadians, I consume a lot of American media. And they're still going to Olive Gardens.
They are.
What's
yeah.
going on? Do the next book on this. Where's our Olive Gardens?
I don't know. The Olive Garden still, all of these chains still have a little bit of life left into them.
Not in this country. Where am I? Where is our Olive Garden? So LaVey liked the Olive Garden, and I thought it was just like an easy family restaurant. You get a bowl. I mean, it's no palma pasta. Don't get me wrong, but it was a nice, easy place to bring the kids. You get a nice bowl of pasta, whatever. No more Olive Gardens.
Unlimited breadsticks, from what I understand.
Right, and then I feel like Eastside Mario's kind of stole that thunder a bit when Olive Gardens disappeared.
If I can, I just want to give a shout out for the book's title.
Yeah.
It's not original. I actually took it from a song, Born with a Tail by the Super Suckers. Do you know the Super Suckers?
No, I mean, I don't think I do.
Oh, you must play them after I leave.
Okay, what era, like give me a little, like what genre, who are we talking about?
Mid-90s. They're on Sub Pop.
Oh, yeah, so Sub Pop, I mean, that's where Nirvana was before they went to the big label.
Yeah,
that was Bleach would be a Sub Pop release, right?
It would be, yes.
Okay, see, you're a cooler guy. Doug, that's why you're an editor. That's why you're the cool guy. You're from Spin Magazine, right? So, you're a much cooler guy than I am. But how was this for you? So I didn't realize till you sat down here over an hour ago and I mentioned that Gilles LeBlanc says hi, and I found out you actually played a role in that, me being on the cover. And I mean, the photographer who's excellent. Do you remember the name of the photographer? Famous. His dad used to write, I think, for the Star. I know, I'm putting it on the spot here. Great photographer, came over, took some wonderful pictures. There's 4 color photos in this 2-page spread. That's kind of a pumping my own tires here. But you made that happen.
I helped make it happen.
Well, I feel like without you, Gilles LeBlanc could not get that printed. We needed an editor. And that's you. And now you're an FOTM, man. I love this.
Same here. I had a blast.
Are we going to do another episode? I mean, every time you write a book, you come over here and talk about it with me.
5 years from now. Ugh.
You going to do a book on the Olive Garden disappearing from Canada?
No. I'll let you write that one.
Maybe it's more of a blog entry.
Maybe it's more of a sentence.
All right. Much love. Everybody subscribe to the Toronto Star. We need a good, strong media, and we need more subscribers there. And Doug, again, thanks for the 2 books. Enjoy your lasagna, enjoy your beer, and thanks for making the trek all the way west.
Thanks for having me.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,597th show. Go to torontomike.com for all your... I said this the other day. Go to torontomike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. And I can't remember, but a guest called me out like, what would be your Toronto Mike needs? And I'm like, I didn't know. I don't know what that means. But if you wanted to
Free lasagna.
Yeah. If you want to know how to find palma pasta, maybe. I don't know. But there are 1,500 plus episodes in the archive. Go back and listen to, I don't know, go listen to Ben Rayner on Toronto Mike. I love that guy. Ben's the best. Can we shout out Ben Rayner? He's the best.
Shout out to Ben.
He's the best. Okay. Shout out to Ben Rayner. We're going to get him back in the basement. Much love to all who made this possible. That is Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta, a lot of P's in that, Palma Pasta, RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Moneris, and Ridley Funeral Home. I'm going into my calendar, everybody. The most exciting part of the extra. Who is my next guest on Toronto Mic'd? Okay, he made the NHL, and he's got the most fascinating story. Garrett Joyce turned me on to this guy. He wrote a story about him for the Hockey News. His name is Luke Sellers, and Luke Sellers will be in the basement 12 noon on Thursday. See you all then.